Should a Gentile who feels drawn to the Torah convert to Judaism or remain a Noahide?
I have often been asked this question, and I always mention, with regards to such a question, the well-known case of Rabbi Eliyahu ben Amuzar. Rabbi Eliyahu ben Amuzar lived some generations ago. He was a very great rabbi and thinker in Italy, and he had a student, a person who was very close to him, a non-Jew, who very much wanted to convert to Judaism. And he, Rabbi Amuzar, ben Amuzar, convinced him not to do so. And he said, if you become the ideal type of Noahide, you will be doing a greater service to humanity than by converting to Judaism. You will be a living example for others to follow, that it is possible and it is also necessary and correct, and will have a great impact on the world for all time if people will know that there is such a person, there are such people, real Noahides, and they will learn from their example and follow in their footsteps. In my experience, and I have come into contact with both with many converts, non-Jews who have converted to Judaism, and on the other hand, many who were very much attracted to the Torah, to Judaism, but chose not to convert. And sometimes, in some cases, it was due to my suggestion perhaps, that they chose not to convert. In my experience, conversion is not always the right answer. And this may surprise some people. Perhaps many people would imagine, would assume that I would say, or that any rabbi would say, of course it's the best possible outcome would be for you, the Gentile who is drawn to the Torah, to the Jewish people, to convert. But in fact it is not always so, for a number of reasons. One reason is the fact that I can state categorically that I have seen more than a few cases of very well-intentioned non-Jews who, because they were drawn to the Tanakh, to the Bible, to the Jewish people, etc., and to Hashem, they chose to convert. But after having done so, they found it very difficult to be absorbed into the community of Jews in which they found themselves. Sometimes this was in Israel, but more often this was true in those cases where a non-Jew converted in Chutz La'aretz, overseas, and felt that he did not fit in to the local community. And this comes about for a number of reasons. First of all, there is a certain lack of understanding on the part of the Jewish people. In other words, first of all, the problem I think often is with the Jews, and not with the convert, with the born Jews, and not with the converted Jew. There is a lack of understanding on the part of many Jews how to deal with and how to relate to a convert, and how to accept that person into our community. And one of the issues is not to necessarily expect that this person who is now a Jew like every other Jew feel obligated to behave and act in every regard like the Jews of that particular community, because as we all know, there are different standards and different customs, different nusha'ot tefillah, different sidurim that people use, and different practices that are sometimes accepted in one community and not accepted in another community. Sometimes the differences are between Ashkenazim or Sfaradim or Temanim. And some Jews, interestingly enough, and some rabbis, seem to expect the convert to assume for example, an Ashkenazi identity. And when this person says, well, I'm not really an Ashkenazi, because I don't have Ashkenazi ancestry, and I'm not really used to one thing more than the other, and I prefer to follow, with regards to certain issues at least, a certain set of customs, and also Piskei Halacha, shall we say, of the Sfaradim or the Temanim, or I choose to follow the Rambam exclusively or almost exclusively. And I'm talking about cases that I have seen with my own eyes. Unfortunately, this often becomes a very big bone of contention between that convert and the community in which he finds himself, or perhaps the rabbi with which he has to deal. This is one issue. Another issue is that sometimes the convert himself discovers after the fact of conversion that he does not really fit in. It could be socially, it could be for all kinds of reasons. He doesn't really fit in to the Jewish community. It's true, he very much loves the Torah, he loves the Jewish people, he identifies with them in many ways, but too late he discovers that he does not really fit in to this group of people, at least those Jews in his locale, with whom he comes into contact. And then he finds himself feeling lonely and even rejected. And this is most unfortunate. And it is it's doubly unfortunate when such a person, sometimes, it happens, when such a person chooses to leave everything, to drop everything, and to cease being an observant Jew altogether. And after having converted, this is a very serious step to take, very serious, and it's definitely prohibited and very improper to do so. What I have seen in many cases is that it is the Tanakh, the Bible, that draws many people to Judaism and to the Jewish people. And if they were allowed to study that Bible and to learn it on a regular basis and implement parts of it, the parts that are relevant to a non-Jew, a person who is not converted to Judaism, to implement parts of that Torah, of what we find in the Tanakh, in their own daily lives, this and their feeling of connection to the Jewish people without being part of the Jewish people, being associated with the Jewish people, is what we're talking about. This would satisfy them, and this would in fact make them very often much happier than full conversion. Because that really is the essence of this discussion. A person can choose to become Jewish, to be a convert, in which case he becomes a Jew in the fullest sense, or a person can choose to be associated with the Jewish people. And there is a concept, there is such a notion in the Torah She'Ba'al Peh, in the oral tradition, a non-Jew who is associated with the Jewish people. And that concept is known as Ger Toshav. I will presently explain what a Ger Toshav is. But first, we should mention here that which the Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, the Nachmanides, writes in his Hidushim, in his writings on Masechet Makot Daf Teth, on page 9 of Tractate Makot. He writes as follows, that there are three terms which Hazal, which the sages use when referring to a non-Jew. One term is Goy or Nochri. Goy is a common term used by Hazal to refer to a non-Jew. Technically, the term Goy means a nation, but it's used loosely by Hazal and in halachic parlance to denote a person of the nations. In other words, a person from a foreign nation. And the word Nochri is the original word in the Torah to denote a non-Jew. So the term Goy or Nochri, says the Ramban, refers to any non-Jew with whom we are not familiar. We do not know a lot about this person. And we assume, because that was the reality, and I believe it is still the reality today, if we look at the world's population as a whole, the majority of non-Jews do not abide by the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, by the 7 Noahide laws. And if they do so, they certainly do not do so, even those who act in accordance with those laws, technically speaking, a majority of people who do so do not do so because they believe that the Torah of Am Yisrael is true and accurate and from Hashem, and that according to that Torah, non-Jews are required to follow these 7 Noahide laws. And as Rambam writes explicitly at the end of the 8th chapter of Ilchot Melachim u'Milhamot, he begins by saying that a person who accepts fully the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws, and does so in front of a Beth Din, in front of a court of Am Yisrael, Hu Anikra Ger Toshav. Such a person is referred to as a Ger Toshav, which we'll presently explain further what that term means. But a person who accepts these ideas of the 7 Noahide laws, but he does not do so because he believes in the Torah as the true system given to the humanity by Hashem. He doesn't see the Torah and the Jewish faith as a truth system which has its source in Hashem, the Creator, but rather he views these ideas that we refer to as the Noahide laws as a proper moral and decent way to lead one's life, which is not the same thing as saying that this is what Hashem has commanded me to do, and this is something that has been made known to the world by the Jewish people. That's not the same thing. So Rambam says a person who does it because he reached this conclusion of his own accord, Rambam says, Ein ze ger toshav, such a person is not referred to as a ger toshav, which we'll presently explain. Ve'eno mi hasidei umot ha'olam, and he's not considered one of the very righteous of the Gentiles. Ela mi hachmehem, he's considered one of the wise Gentiles. In other words, a person who reaches this conclusion is indeed correct. This is a proper and decent and desirable way to lead one's life, and so therefore he is a smart person, he is intelligent, he is wise, but he has not reached the point of understanding that these essential moral principles are part of the truth system known as Torah Yisrael, the Torah of Am Yisrael, and that he is obligated by that Torah to act in such a way. In other words, the difference is between someone who does something because he thinks it's right, as opposed to someone who does something because Hashem thinks and tells him that it is right. The same is true, by the way, for a Jew. If a Jew performs a mitzvah, a commandment, because it seems to him that this is a good idea, even, shall we say, something like giving charity to the poor, which is something that many people can identify with and see as something proper and moral and correct and necessary. If a person gives charity to the poor because it seems correct and proper to him, that is one thing, but that is not at all to be compared to someone who gives charity to the poor because he knows that this is the express will of Hashem and he's doing Hashem's will, and it is his duty to do Hashem's will. Chazal always distinguished between ha-mitzuweh v'oseh or mi she'eno mitzuweh v'oseh, he who is commanded to do something and does it, as opposed to someone who is not commanded and nevertheless does it. Normally we would think that the person who is not commanded to do something and yet chooses to do so is to be more highly praised and more highly regarded than someone who does something because he was commanded by Hashem to do so. But this is the exact opposite of what the Torah teaches us. The Torah teaches us, Chazal say explicitly, Gadol ha-mithlua wa'oseh, he who is ordered, commanded by Hashem to do something, and goes ahead and does so, and he knows that he is doing the will of Hashem, and he is required to perform the will of Hashem. In other words, he sees himself as not as a free agent who may pick and choose what he wants to do and what appeals to him, but rather someone who knows that he must be subservient to Hashem and accepts the yoke of heaven. That person is much greater. The exact same thing is true of a non-Jew. A non-Jew who chooses to live in a certain fashion, which is in fact technically in accordance with the demands of the Torah, with Hashem's express will for the non-Jewish world as to how they should behave, such a person is doing the right thing, but he is not at all on the same level and is not accorded the same halachic status either, as we will presently see, as someone who does it because he knows that he must follow Hashem's commandments and do that which Hashem desires and commands all B'nai Noah, all Noahides, to do. So, returning to the Ramban, as we said, Ramban explains that Hazal used three terms to refer to non-Jews. One term is Goy or Nochri, which refers to any non-Jew with whom we are not particularly familiar, and therefore we do not know how he conducts himself and what he believes and what he thinks. And therefore, the assumption is that he does not live according to the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, and he certainly does not accept them for the right reason, as we just described and explained. Such a person is known as a Goy or a Nochri. And such a person, we assume, is not one of the righteous Gentiles, because the majority at this point in time, as it was at that time, at the time of Hazal as well, do not seem to see things that way and do not behave that way. The second term is a Ben Noah. A Ben Noah, or a Noahide, is someone whom we do know accepts the Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, and he does so for the right reason. In other words, he knows that this is the will of Hashem. He knows that this information was revealed to us through Moshe Rabbeinu, and he accepts these ideas and these concepts and these precepts for that reason. And Rambam writes this explicitly. Rambam says, Kol ha-mekabel sheva ha-misvot v'nizhar la'asotan, he who accepts them, as we said before, and as the Rambam is about to say now, he who accepts them for the right reason and is careful about living in accordance with those rules, such a person is considered one of the righteous of the Gentiles. And such a person has a portion in the world to come. This is an important piece of information. So let's stop for one moment and let's just stress that point. Again, a non-Jew who knows that part of the Torah, part of Judaism, aimed at the non-Jewish world is the system known as Sheva Mitzvot B'nai Noach, the 7 Noahide laws, and he understands that this is the revealed will of Hashem, revealed to the Jewish people through Moshe Rabbeinu, and it is directed at the entire world. And a non-Jew who accepts and understands this and acts in accordance with these precepts, such a person is called a Hasid, a very pious person, and such a person has a portion of the world to come. So, right there and then, we have a good reason to say to certain people who may be considering converting to Judaism, you do not necessarily have to do so in order to have a portion in the world to come, if that is what you're worried about, shall we say. And I've heard this said to me by certain people who are considering converting, and they said, well, if I don't convert, I won't have a portion in the world to come. And I said to them, well, that's not true. And I quoted exactly what we just read now. Rambam says exactly the opposite. And this is based on the words of Hazal. So it's important for Gentiles to know this fact. That's number one. And Rambam continues and stresses, Wahu, and this is on condition, when is such a person called a pious, very righteous person of the nations and has a portion in the world to come? She kabilotham u'yaseotham, he accepts them and lives according to these laws. Because Hashem commanded these things in the Torah and mentioned them and stressed these things to Moshe Rabbeinu. And Moshe Rabbeinu was informed by Hashem that all human beings are required to follow these laws. So to recap briefly, first of all, a goy or a nochri, one of the terms used by Chazal to refer to a non-Jew, refers to the average non-Jew about whom we have no clear knowledge that this person is a Noahide, and we must assume that he is not, because that is the reality usually. The second category, we said, was the Ben Noach, a person who does accept the Sheva Miswoth for the right reason and lives according to the Sheva Miswoth. The third category is the Ger Toshav. Literally, Ger Toshav means a resident stranger. Ger is a stranger, a person from a foreign land or a foreign nation, and a Toshav is a resident. A Ger Toshav is a Ben Noach, is a Noahide, who accepts the Sheva Miswoth for the right reasons, as we mentioned, and lives according to them, of course. He also goes, however, one step further. In other words, he goes before a Beth Din, a court, a Torah court of the Jewish people, and officially takes upon himself these Sheva Miswoth. He makes an official announcement in front of the court that I accept these Miswoth, and I also wish to be more closely associated with you, with the Jewish people. Such a person may be allowed, as opposed to other Gentiles who are not allowed to reside in the land of Israel, because Eretz Yisrael is a very special place, and the Jewish people are a special people, and our purpose and our aim is to create here a special kind of society, and therefore not all people fit into that society. People who have the right ideas and behave in the right way, such people may be accepted, but not just anybody. A non-Jew who accepts the Sheva Miswoth B'nai Noach for those reasons and comes before a Beth Din and says so, and declares this and is accepted by the Beth Din, such a person may be allowed to reside in Eretz Yisrael amongst the Jewish people. And such a person, obviously, therefore, will have a much closer association with the Jewish people. Now, it is true that there is a discussion amongst the Posukim between the Rambam and the Ra'avad whether this status of Ger Toshav can exist at the present point in history or only at some future time. We won't go into the details of that discussion now. But having said that, there is no question that it is possible today to imagine a situation in which non-Jews who are so motivated, no one has to do so, of course, but if a person is motivated to do so, which wishes to forge a closer association with the Jewish people, and wishes to announce and declare before Beth Din his acceptance of the Sheva Miswoth B'nai Noach, it should be possible, in my view, according to all opinions, both the Rambam and the Ra'avad, to give that person a status of Ger Toshav, even though it's not the full, perhaps not the full-blown concept of a Ger Toshav. In other words, it may not be the case at this point in time that such a person would be allowed to reside in Eretz Yisrael. That is, as I say, a point of discussion in Halacha, and a future Beit Din would probably have to decide that issue. A great Beit Din, a Sanhedrin, a Beit Din Gadol. But in the meantime, to forge, to create a category of being, of status for non-Jews who have rejected all foreign ideas and philosophies and religions and wish to come closer to Hashem by way of the Torah and by way of association with Am Yisrael, to provide such people with a feeling of association, not of joining the Jewish people in the fullest sense, but of association with the Jewish people, and showing them in which way they can live their lives in a manner in accordance with the Torah, providing them with a certain religious framework and certain concepts and courses of study, etc., which today many such people are at a loss to understand. What exactly are they supposed to do? Because the Sheva Mitzvot Bnei Noach are essentially don'ts. Do not do this and do not do that. Do not shed blood, do not worship Avodah Zarah, foreign worship, do not act cruelly towards animals, etc. All sorts of prohibitions, but it doesn't actually tell you what you should do. And this is insufficient. There is room, and it is necessary, I believe, for the Jewish people to show the way for such non-Jews, to give them a framework for living their lives and achieving a sense of purpose and meaning and fulfillment. It does say, Rambam does write, that non-Jews are not allowed to invent their own religious system. Rambam writes this in Perek Asiri of Ilchot Merachim. He writes, "En manihim otham l'hadesh dath v'la'asot mitzvot la'asman mida'athan." We are not allowed, if we are in a position to prevent it, we are not to allow non-Jews to come up with all kinds of newfangled religious systems and to make up their own mitzvot and the like. But perhaps one could read the words of the Rambam in such a way. Rambam says, "En manihim otham l'hadesh dath." But we are allowed to. We, the Jewish people, in fact, are required to show the way. We must be the teachers and the leaders and the instructors when it comes to this. If not, then really we're forcing these well-intentioned non-Jews to invent their own system or their own ideas, and very often to go astray because they perhaps do not have the training, almost certainly do not have the training, the understanding and the background to know exactly how to go about this great endeavor of creating this form of this way of life and this form of association with the Jewish people. This is a great challenge which presents itself today and will present itself in coming generations to the Jewish people. And the sooner the Jewish people and righteous Gentiles get together and work together in order to create such a system, the better it will be for all of us, for all of humanity.
Thank you, Rabbi Bar-Hayim. We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. We would also like to suggest the following opportunity to our viewers. If you identify with Rabbi Bar-Hayim's message and would like to sponsor or dedicate a video interview with the rabbi in honor or memory of a loved one, if you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.